Escalade. We are kicking off the Circle webinar. Now I'm going to just wait a few more minutes as people register. We know we've got a number of you on the line, but we're going to pop you on mute again for just a minute or two whilst we allow a few more people to hook up now that it's 1:30. Talk to you soon. And hello everyone, welcome to our third webinar, Maintaining Momentum in Community Groups. Fantastic to have a number of you on the line, and as you've been letting us know where you are situated around Australia, I have to say that thanks to Kerry Anderson with the letter K, we've got people from Katanning, Kyogle, Kununurra, so the Ks have it in terms of the most popular letter that people's communities start with. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're looking forward to having the next hour with you. We're just continuing to get a few people register online. We are going to be recording this, so just letting you know that if you have to jump off early, that you can certainly catch this again subsequently online and listen at your leisure. Now, for those of you who don't know my voice, my name's Alexandra Gartman and I'm CEO of FRRR, and welcome to Maintaining Momentum in Community Groups. As I said earlier, this is our third webinar in a series on creating inspiring rural leadership and community engagement. Now, that's my face that you see on the top right-hand side of the screen. Next, then you have Kerry Anderson and Ian McClelland, who are both actually sitting with me in Bendigo in regional Victoria in the same room, which is great to have a webinar with people face-to-face as well. I've been here with FRRR for 3 years, and like the rest of the team, we're exceptionally passionate about creating opportunities for rural, regional and remote communities. Shortly I'll introduce Kerry Anderson, who works for Community Leadership Loddon Murray, and Ian McClelland, founder of the Birchip cropping group, who are going to share their experiences in community organisations. The three of us are going to chat for about 45 minutes before we move into questions from the audience. Now, we've got about 70 people registered for the webinar, so we may not be able to get to all of your questions, but hopefully we'll get to quite a few of them, and we plan to post answers to the rest of the questions we can't address on the FRRR website after the webinar. Now, at the end of the webinar today, we're going to ask that everyone spend about 30 seconds answering a very short multiple choice evaluation survey, which is going to help us to continue to deliver effective webinars in the future. Now, a few technical tips, particularly if you haven't joined us before. If you have, please bear with me because we do have some new people joining us today. If you have any issues along the way or you've got any questions you'd like us to answer, please send us a message in the chat box. Simply type the question into the box in your control panel and one of our team is monitoring them as they come in. Feel free to send questions in during the webinar. As I said, we may address them on the spot or save them to the end depending on the flow, but we're really keen to hear from you and about what your community is doing. If you can, put your phone and computer on mute so that you can hear us but we can't hear you. That should help to avoid feedback on the lines or via the computer. And if you can tweet or Facebook while we're chatting, please use the hashtag Community Leadership. Now, as I said, we are recording the webinar, so feel free to let others know about the webinar if they haven't been able to join us today. Now, at the risk of boring some of you who have joined our previous webinars, I just want to take a couple of minutes to introduce FRRR and provide some background on the Circle program. Established in 2000 by the Sydney Myer Fund and the federal government, FRRR's mission is to champion the economic and social strength of Australia's rural, regional and remote communities. And we do that via partnerships with the private sector, philanthropy and government. We do have a particular focus on smaller communities of fewer than 10,000 people, and we operate nationally, although we are headquartered here in regional Victoria in Bendigo. We work in three main ways. We provide grants for not-for-profit community organisations, we lend our DGR status to community organisations and hold funds on their behalf, and we help to build local capacity, particularly through community foundations, to find local solutions to local problems. Now, since 2000, we have distributed more than 51 million to communities across Australia and supported a lot of capacity building in various community organisations. The Circle program was launched last year in October in partnership with the Deputy Prime Minister Warren Truss, and this program aims to increase leadership and build capacity in rural, regional and remote communities. It's one of 20 programs that we run, so we do stay fairly busy. And this particular program is funded by the federal government through the Department of Infrastructure and Regional Development. The program itself has 4 prongs. Firstly, webinars, in which this is the third in a series of 5. We have video case studies and animated clips, which you can find on our resources page and the YouTube channel. We are also undertaking a leadership program review, which will be featured in our next webinar. And we are providing grants for community foundations and community leadership programs, and these grants are currently open for applications. Now that you know a little bit about the Circle program and SRRR, let's get the webinar started. So if I can introduce today's speakers. Both Kerry and Ian have direct and indirect experience of running successful and sustainable community groups. Kerry is a project manager with Community Leadership Loddon Murray. She's a consultant on various internationally recognised projects and workshops and has run a number of different sessions with community sector topics. She's a member of Regional Development Australia on the Loddon Murray Committee, and if you are in central Victoria, you will regularly hear her on ABC radio and seeing her opinion pieces in print and on social media. Welcome, Kerry.
Thanks, Alex.
And we have Ian McClelland. Now, Ian farms in northwest Victoria. He's a farmer of wheat, barley, canola, lentil, sheep and the odd cow. He is founding member and past chair of the Birchip Cropping Group, which we'll shorten to BCG, which is a not-for-profit organisation in the Victorian Mallee and Wimmera region focused on sustainable and profitable agricultural systems. And under Ian's chairmanship, the BCG received in 2007 the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Community Business Partnerships. Now, today's webinar is about sharing stories about what's worked in different communities, and I look forward to Ian and Kerry sharing some of their experience. We also want to hear from you, so if you have a story about how your group has maintained momentum or a tactic that's worked for your community, message us and we'll try and share that through this webinar and subsequently. So, how exactly do community groups maintain momentum? Well, when we started to plan the content of this webinar, we spoke to quite a few people about the common factors in organisations that are successful and maintain their momentum. And if I had to sum it up in one word, it really came back to influence, and more specifically, successfully managing different spheres of influence. And if we borrow a concept from Stephen Covey, being the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it is about spheres of influence. When you're in a community group, you're trying to influence a particularly wide range of people. And we've broken this down on the screen for you into 3 distinct groups. Volunteers and members, so those people within your immediate sphere of influence. The community itself, those that you need to work with and you're there to serve. And supporters and stakeholders, those who could either positively or negatively affect what you're doing. Another important concept to keep in mind as we talk through things today is the issue of social capital, by which we mean the strength of bonding within your community, bridging across communities, and networking with those outside of your community. We're going to try and bring these concepts to life as we go through the presentation. So let's spend a bit of time on what we believe, firstly, is at the core of our sphere of influence, purpose. A clear and relevant purpose is fundamental to the success of any organisation. It needs to be upfront and at the core. Does everyone know about it? Is your purpose still relevant as time marches on? And how often do you check in on purpose and make sure that you're doing things that are relevant to your community and for your community? Is it understood by all? It is sometimes particularly easy or easier with single focus organisations like an emergency service entity like the SES or a rural fire service. And it sometimes can be much harder with service organisations and networks like Progress Associations or your neighbourhood house, who are trying to do many things for the community. But it is important to review your purpose on a regular basis, and sometimes organisations that start with one focus, for example in disaster recovery, can evolve over time, and that purpose and rationale can sometimes become a bit grey as time evolves. Ian, I know that you're a firm believer in purpose and mission. Can you tell us why you believe it's so important to have a strong purpose?
Thanks, Alex. Our group started over 22 years ago when a group of farmers, a dozen farmers, started to worry about the sustainability of our local community and our local towns. And we also realised that we're missing out on a lot of opportunities in relation to research and technical outcomes. So we decided to do something about it and to do our own trial work to pass the information on to community. But before we started any of this work, we sat down and did a strategic plan. We came up with the mission or the purpose of increasing profit and viability for Mallee-Wimmera communities. And we did this through research and exchange of ideas between researchers, industry and farmers, the melting pot of ideas. Now, as this organisation grew, everything we did, we were able to link back to that purpose. It inspired us, it gave us something to really aim for, but it also kept us on our purpose. It was a great example of something that gave you a mission.
Mm. And so BCG's been around for about 20 years. Has the purpose evolved over time, or have you had to modify and adjust it?
Yeah, we have modified it slightly. Our purpose now is to increase the prosperity of farmers and rural communities through innovation. Basically the same, it's just a little bit clearer. But we still aim to do exactly that. And then we've been successful in some things and probably not so successful in others.
Mm. Okay, thanks Ian. Kerry, when we were talking ahead of this webinar, you spoke about an organisation that you think has done a great job in evolving and adapting its purpose. Could you share that with us now?
Yes, I'm not a member of the Country Women's Association, the good old CWA, but it's an association that I really have some admiration for, and I think everyone would agree it has changed perception over the years. And if you look at minutes from the 1950s, you'll see them talking about craft work and cooking and a few social activities. But during the drought years, and Ian would have noticed this in the area he farms in, the CWA started to take on a different focus, and it's very much got prevalent in political areas, in helping with welfare and a whole range of things, advocacy for rural areas. So, you know, it really has reinvented itself and got a new lease of life, I would think, and I think that they're a great example of an organisation that has looked at what its purpose is and perhaps reframed it in today's world.
And I think you're right, I certainly follow the CWA in my social media feeds, and some of what they do and what they're sharing is phenomenal and quite different to what I had in mind as to what they did. So they've obviously looked at changing and engaging in different ways to maintain their momentum.
Yeah.
So we've heard from Ian and Kerry briefly now about purpose and how critical it is to check in, make sure it's clear and share that and communicate it with members. So if we can assume that we've got a group that has a really clear and compelling purpose, how do you acquire and retain members and volunteers who are passionate about it? What if you've got too many people doing, too few people doing too much? Or you've got people that have been there a long time, either because they don't think anyone else can do the job, or there is no one else putting their hand up. We hear this time and time again across communities. It can be a really hard slog to stay excited and fresh. And I know from some organisations and questions that we've had ahead of the webinar that this is a challenge for many of you. So just how do you get people to share the load? And there are lots of things that your group can do to successfully engage and retain members and volunteers. There's having really clear guidelines and processes, being really efficient, and for people to know that if they become engaged and connected with your organisation, that you're not going to waste their time. You can limit and rotate roles. There's some great examples of skills registers that we're going to talk about shortly. We've listed a number of these that I've just mentioned on the slide, including things like providing training for those new to a role. But Kerry, could you tell us about the Kahuna Progress Association and some of the things that they've done?
Well, Kahuna is a lovely little irrigation town on the Murray River, about population 2,300, deep in dairy country, and a few other innovative businesses. And Community Leadership were lucky enough to work on a project, Operation Next Gen. And I got to observe the Progress Association there. I was really impressed with the way they took on a new initiative like Operation Next Gen, where we had 10 community ambassadors, and they were people not necessarily in existing community groups or leadership roles, but they were prepared to put their hand up and have a go at something new. But they needed some sort of structure to work under, and the Progress Association said, great, love new ideas, new people, we will create a subgroup, and that gave them a structure to work to. Obviously helped them with insurances, credibility, their networks. You know, they were putting out to their members, here's a group of new people, trying out some new ideas, endorsed what they were doing, helped with mentoring, whole range of things. The outcome of that over a 2-year period is that some of those people actually stepped up into leadership roles, and the current president is now is one of those Operation Next Gen people that wasn't previously involved with the group. So it was a great strategy on their behalf to embrace new people, support them with what they were doing, and the outcome was that they actually had strengthened their organisation, which is terrific.
It is, and it's great to see new people stepping up into those leadership roles that we know at most AGMs are exceptionally hard to fill. Ian, if I can turn to you, what sort of things did BCG put in place to help share the load across volunteers?
Well, we actually, after the first year of mostly volunteers, we decided we had pretty big ambitions, and that there were a lot of things that we didn't have the expertise in. And trying to get farmers to do research is not really a good fit. And we realised that to do the work properly, you needed professionals, and that the farmers could support them and do a whole lot of other things related to the work. Funding applications, getting money for the group to do the work. And we realised the importance of professionals, the importance of getting the right people to do the right job. Lots of organisations that have 90% of the capacity, but that 10% is missing. And to be able to get professionals in to help you was a really important breakthrough for us. We started to build a structure. In the beginning, we were interested in the work, the outcomes, but we realised that we had to start to have a committee, then a board, subcommittees to think about new projects and about what the work we really want to do. There was a whole series of things that needed to be done in a structured way. Finance committee, someone who does the money, someone who does the program, someone who thinks about new projects, someone who funds the projects, and so forth. So as the years went on, we've developed quite a sophisticated structure, like a company, that helps us maintain our sustainability.
So it sounds like you really broke down a lot of the work you were doing into different portfolios and pulled people in for what got them excited or what skill set they had.
Yeah, so the farmers tended to be the people who oversaw the projects, who were the enthusiasm behind it.
Fantastic. Kerry, back to you. Are there other things that you've seen groups do to help share the load across volunteers?
Yes, and it brings to mind the Ian Plowman research up in Queensland. I think he did some research with 8 communities, and one of his findings was that the more shared load there is, the more people involved in roles, the more vibrant the community. And I always think about that research when people talk to me about, oh, we only had 3 people turn up to our AGM, which was actually said to me yesterday. So it's happening all the time. I really do believe that having fixed terms is a great way to do it. I've seen it happen in the kindergartens. Anyone with children who have come through kindergarten will know this. It generally is a 2-year term because you need 1 year to work out what you're doing, and then the next year you're helping mentoring new people coming on and sharing your wisdom. And I think a 2-year window works quite well. Community leadership have exactly the same framework. So the board positions are 2 years with a maximum of 2 terms. And, you know, people sometimes hate having to go off the board, but we say, well, that's great, have a break and then you can re-nominate and come back. But it's really important, I think, for people to know it's a limited period of time you're committing to, because we're all very busy, and if you really love it, you can always come back for another term later.
Fantastic. I've actually seen that sort of fixed term rotation system operate with one of our partner donor organisations, where they're a foundation with a very small board, and they rotate the role of the chair every year, so that even across a small board of 5 people, everyone knows that every couple of years they're going to have that chair gig, and so it is, you know you can give it up 12 months later as well. Now, Kerry, what are the sorts of enablers that you need to have in place so that you can have that turnover and it's not a real challenge for anyone coming into the role?
Well, it's coming back to the structure of your organisation. You know, Ian talked about the importance of purpose. It's also your constitution, you know, your framework that you operate from. So knowing that, you know, what is in that constitution and what you should be working to those periods of time, I think investing the time with new people coming onto the committee, and I do appreciate when I join a committee or a board when they take the time to really walk me through how the organisation operates and understanding that level of governance, because we're volunteers, and if we're going to invest our time, it's really good if the organisation invests time in us to develop our skills and understanding. And I think you have to keep revisiting that. Now, Ian, you've been on a board for a long period of time. We have to stop and think sometimes, don't we? You know, and revisit, you know, what we're here for and what we should be doing. So, even though we may be experienced people, I think we need to undergo those periodic reviews. And the best part of all is breaking down the roles. You know, it's not fair for one person to take on everything. And I've seen it happen time and time again. People just have so much passion, so much drive. They really want to do it, that they're actually doing their committee and their other members a disservice by not allowing that load to be shared and encouraging other people to step up. I think the great leaders of the committees I've been on are the ones that have actively said, well, you know, Alex, why don't you have a go at this? And I'll help you if you're stuck, or Ted over here could pair with you. I think that's really the key to the good leadership in organisations.
Great. I think that carries through to an example I'd like to share about the New Ventures Regional Group in Oyen, who actually introduced a shadowing board succession project where, as you were saying, Kerry, asking someone to step into a role, but asking them to shadow you first in your existing community leadership role, and matching young people with directors on community boards. And in the instance of this group in Oyen, the young people spent 4 lots of 2 hours with each of the board members, and they were mentored around skills and confidence, and were able to see what their predecessor, or potential predecessor hopefully, was doing in terms of that community organisation. And they were quite successful, because 5 out of the 7 of those young people then chose to join those members' respective boards as youth representatives. So it was very successful in attracting new people and helping with that board succession issue. And so, as you said, Kerry, often it's just about asking and providing the pathway for people to follow. Now, I know that's an issue that a lot of communities are grappling with, is simply finding the volunteers, particularly in communities that have very small populations. how do you attract volunteers in that situation? Is it, can you compete for volunteers, or are there ways to collaborate so you can all share the same people in those communities? Ian, I think the Birchip Cropping Group actually took a merger with another farmer group, being Wimmera Farming Systems. How did that go, and what were the benefits and the challenges?
We started off as we're doing work in a similar area to them. They were in a different region. They didn't have the structure that we had. They had the ambition and the drive to want to do the work. So we started doing their work for them under their guidance, and before long they were on our board, and that we were able to just amalgamate their group into ours, and their members are on our committees, and so it made streamline the whole business of the work and the funding. So engagement was very positive, and it's been a great partnership.
That's good to hear. And for those of you who are looking at mergers between not-for-profits, Justice Connect is a great organisation and a website to access resources and all of the legal stuff that you need to help make that a smoother process. Kerry, have you got any comments from the Operation NextGen in relation to ways to share the load?
Look, as I said before, the 10 ambassadors, the concept was 10 people talk to 10 people, and that's sharing the load, finding the skills within your community. Because there's people out there, they don't necessarily belong to the committees or the groups as such, but that doesn't mean that they're not willing to get involved. They're only too happy to step up quite often when they're asked. And a classic case is how many committees are looking for a treasurer. Every accountant in town is just hounded to take on that role. When in actual fact, it's a great opportunity for someone to learn financial skills, and maybe the accountant will be their mentor and assist them with that. So, the ideas of skills registers in town, of who's got what sort of skills, what equipment they've got to help dig holes even, it can be as basic as that. Knowing who they are, and generally people are very happy if you tap on their door, and that maybe sitting on a committee is not actually what they're wanting to do. And I think respecting that, we did some research over in the Bullock Shire, and talking to young people, the idea of being on a committee is not always appealing, but that doesn't discount them from getting involved in other ways.
Great, thanks Kerry, thanks Ian. So let's assume that we've implemented lots of these ideas and have lots of diverse people involved in the organisation. One of the many things that we don't do enough is say thank you for their donation of time and talent. Ian, you were speaking earlier about the importance of recognising volunteers, and at SRRR we're lucky to see some of the wonderful examples of how communities acknowledge and support the volunteers they work with. One example that springs to mind is that of the Mission Beach Community Arts Centre in North Queensland, who hosted a volunteer reward day after the massive amount of work that they did supporting their community in the recovery post-Cyclone Yasi. And they had a number of people come in, and masseuses and beauticians and relaxation experts, really just to give something back to their volunteers for their engagement over a pretty tough period of time. So Ian, how does BCG recognise its volunteers that turn up and help the organisation?
I think you have to remember sometimes organisations have this long slog through a work program or something. But I think it's important that you have a few early successes in an organisation. Nothing like success to breed involvement. People say, gee, this group's really doing interesting things, and gee, I love those outcomes, and suddenly they want to be part of it. And that is a huge benefit if you can get some early successes. Sure, they have to believe in the purpose, they have to be valued. In other words, they have to see that the work they're doing is valuable, part of the purpose, part of the success. And a lot of volunteers, they do it for the social engagement. The benefit of our organisation when people are at field days or seminars or events, it's the social contact, it's the learning together, it's the work that becomes fun. And I think by valuing their work, by making sure that it's not just too onerous, that there are some times of celebration and social benefits. I mean, it's very important that you keep thinking about those things.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Kerry, have you got some practical examples of ways organisations have recognised their volunteers?
Yes, I'm a volunteer at Buda Historic Home and Garden, which is in my hometown of Castlemaine, so we've got a slightly bigger population out there, 8,000. But what I like is that they're always featuring volunteers in their newsletter, on their blogs, in the media, you know, acknowledging everyone's having a go. We're not looking for thanks, we do it because we love it, but it's acknowledging we're part of the big Buda family, and I think that's important to involve everybody in your media and let everyone tell their stories why we do what we do.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'll just take this opportunity now to publicly thank and acknowledge both Kerry and Ian for their time and talent today as volunteer presenters on this webinar.
Thank you.
Now, it's one thing to connect and engage with your members and your volunteers, but it's quite another to engage the wider community, particularly when your community might be diverse in its ages, its interests and its beliefs. And at times your community group has to be speaking on behalf of that wider community. Now, one way to engage members of the community is through creating new spaces for new conversations. And on the slide we've provided some examples of different kinds of approaches and tools your group might choose to use. There's the kitchen cabinet, inviting a small group around the equivalent of a kitchen table for a roundtable discussion. Setting up a listening post in front of the supermarket or post office on a regular basis to hear what community members are interested in. There's even the community clothesline idea, which we recently heard about from Mexico. And there was a group that hung up a public clothesline and invited all of the community members to hang up ideas and feedback on particular things. And they called it the clothesline of wishes, as a place for community members to place their wish for their community, which organisations can then subsequently go and act on. So there's lots of different ways to engage. And Kerry, I understand that you've got an interesting example of where a community has done things a little differently.
Well, just going back to our Operation Next Gen project, we wanted to avoid having the usual council-type community development discussions, so we deliberately chose new places to hold our conversations in, and that created great interest. We had an old butter factory, we had a old mechanics workshop, we had a winery, warehouse, places that people don't normally go. And straight away, that's creating interest. It's saying, here's an open slate, we're having a new conversation, doing something differently. Likewise, Reedsdale, I know they wanted to talk to their young people, so they went to the local cafe where they knew the kids went after school and sat down and bought them coffee and cake. And so existing places equally are just as good if you go to them. So there's a couple of different ways to look at it.
Yeah, fantastic. Ian, I understand that the BCG took a unique approach to consulting your regional community by using a phone book. Can you tell us a bit about that?
One of the things we tried to do was we called every seventh person in the telephone book and asked them about did they know us and what work we were doing and had any suggestions for the future. This was in a period when we were going through droughts, and the work we did on social research and people coping with the drought was quite important in the sort of delivery of new information.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Sounds interesting. I'm sure you had some very interesting responses to those phone calls. Now, we know that a key challenge in any of these exercises is to make sure that you're being inclusive and not just going to the people that you do or don't know. That seventh in the phone book is always one that you're not so sure on. But Kerry, do you have any tips on engaging specific audiences, and particularly young people, because I know that all of us in our community organisations wonder how we can attract the next generation?
Yeah. Well, obviously you need to communicate them with ways that they wish to communicate, and one of the big findings we had was that the internet is just so important to them, particularly with so many people moving into communities. And it's great for them to be able to find out information on a website. So having a web presence is really important to engaging young people so that they can find out who you are, what you're about, and if they're interested in volunteering, how to go to it. And a great example of that was a young girl that lives in Birchip, moved there, a professional woman, and was interested in the arts and saw the Rex Theatre in Charlton. Now that's, what, a 30-minute, 40-minute drive, Ian? But because her interest was there, captured by the internet, she drove there. So if you're wanting to engage young people, I can't stress highly enough the use of the internet.
Now I understand that one of the groups in Kahuna used Instagram as a way to engage their community.
They did, and that was a way, it was a bit of a mystery element, interesting photographs around the town, and nobody knew who was posting it. So it captured the young people's imagination. The question on everyone's lips, who's doing this? And helped to engage them in what they were doing, and that was interesting. So I'm not a great Instagram user, but you can always find someone that can use Instagram and do it for you, and many other things.
Yeah, fantastic. Now before we leave this particular topic, I just wanted to touch on the importance of responding to what you've heard. So it's great to engage and seek feedback, but if you don't actually do something about that and make sure people see you responding to it, they'll stop giving you that feedback down the track. So therefore it is important to act on ideas, and sometimes it's actually by trying something that doesn't necessarily work that you can ultimately come up with the next idea. And Ian, I understand that the BCG is quite famous for some of the stuff-up tours that you used to run.
We have had stuff-up tours, and we've had stuff-up trials too. We actually deliberately do a trial badly, or as a farmer might do it, and show them the results. So you often learn by your mistakes as well as from the good things that happen. So that's often we get ideas, and we decide that we're funded a lot of our work we do, but we think the idea is such a good idea that we just do it anyway, and out of reserves. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. When they work, suddenly funding bodies want to be with us.
Yeah. Thank you. Certainly one of the questions that we've had today is how to engage the community when it's very transient. And we know that many communities across Australia are experiencing more and more fly-in, fly-out workers, and even with more commuting regional communities where volunteers are only available on the weekend. There are an increasing number of very transient rural, regional and remote communities. Kerry, have you got any suggestions for how to connect with those communities?
One great example I saw was up on Barham. We had 2 years of earthworks for an environmental levy there with 150 contractors engaged on that job. And I just happened to be in town the evening that the local bowling club were holding a barbecue dinner, barefoot bowls, and got all those contractors engaged, and it was the biggest fundraiser that they had, gold coin and raffle, and I won a prize in the raffle, so I was very excited. But I thought that was a great example of how to engage with I guess contractors that were living there during the week but going home of a weekend and didn't have any real affiliation.
Okay, thank you very much, Kerry. We've often seen a trap that people consult widely but then don't necessarily report back to the community on what they're doing. So it is hard to stay motivated and engaged if you don't see anything happening or your ideas get swallowed up in black holes. So we know that communicating and telling your story is really important. There are a range of ways that you can do that. It does create understanding. It helps your organisation to be transparent. And it's giving clear messages to those members in your community and the wider community. And I don't think every community organisation needs to have its own newsletter. There's different ways that you can tell your message in other forums, both in the written form but also across social media and face-to-face. So it is important to be frequent, relevant and innovative in how you tell your story so that the wider community and those that you're trying to influence are able to connect and know what you're doing. Now, your supporters and stakeholders are usually the most diverse group of all, from politicians and regulators to funders to people who have left your community but still want to connect with the place where they grew up, for example. So what can you do to harness these people, and how can you get them to contribute treasure, time and talent and help you maintain your momentum? These aren't people that you get to see every day, but they like what you do, think that you're relevant, and they generally, hopefully, know why you're doing what you do. And they might be keen to chip in where possible. So what can you do to engage them? Now, we've talked about social capital in our community and connecting with members and volunteers within our community. We've talked about bridging across the community and sharing what you do. The third element of social capital is about networking with decision makers and influencers, which is why it is important to really foster a broad coalition of supporters. Ian, I know that BCG has been particularly successful at embracing a fairly wide range of people and building a broad coalition of those that can support what you do both here across Australia and internationally. What are some of the things that you've done?
Great. And a good example is what we have is a database is a friends list. Right from the very beginning, we had a lot of people who were interested in the work we did, whether they were researchers or industry or friends. So we had a list where we sent them a whole lot of information about what we were doing. And it's surprising how that friends list helped. For example, when our previous CEO resigned, he sent a letter out to our friends list to say, I'm resigning, does anyone know a good CEO? 2 hours later, we got the name of Alexander Cartman to come up to be CEO. So after due process, we realised that she really was the best person for the job.
Thank you for that, Ian.
Also, we found one of our successes is the fact that because of our mission, we give a lot of information away. And it's important that everyone gets it in the end, even though we have a membership base. So we found quite early that the more information we gave away for nothing, the more people wanted to give us more money to give more information away for nothing. It's like the old free paper that you get in the railway station. It really does work.
Mm. Great ideas. Thanks, Ian. Kerry, you've also got some great examples to share with us about harnessing a broad coalition of supporters.
Yeah, and I guess this is wearing my Regional Development of Australia Loddon Murray Committee hat, because we see a lot of great projects come through that medium. And I was very impressed with Donald Family Services, and that's a little town in the Wimmera, about 1,700 population. And what impressed me about, they decided that the kindergarten had to be replaced, but they looked bigger than that. So the kinder combined with the childcare, with the maternal health, with the local council, and they worked together on a submission, and they got the whole community together to recognise that this was their #1 priority. Now this is including people that don't have children. They just were so clearly articulating the need that everybody of all ages understood why this was important to the town. They were then able to embrace that concept. They supported the working bees, the fundraising, the letters of support, and that submission for funding, for government funding, came through so strongly through that collaboration. So, you know, get together with every organisation in your town, your service clubs, your sporting clubs, your local council, and think about the wider benefit of that project and work together. And that was one great example I saw.
Fantastic. We've actually just been across to South Australia in Cummins, and we heard that the Cummins community was particularly proactive and innovative in the way that they raised funds, and essentially have a town umbrella organisation that it really drives a lot of the fundraising. It's the Cummins and District Enterprise Committee that organises quite major events that help to bring people to town, and then smaller organisations within the community use that as a backdrop for their fundraising activities. And it gives them the opportunity to raise their profile, engage members in different ways, and they've been particularly effective, and they're going to be the next community that we feature on our YouTube channel. So I encourage everyone to have a look at our YouTube channel. I've also heard from the Birchip Community Foundation in Queensland about how they've used a network of ambassadors. So that's really fostering a very broad coalition of supporters where they've got about 100 ambassadors, and so they find people that they can connect with their community. They host events, bring those people together in different parts across the area, and those individuals have got no other role apart from promoting the work of the Birchip Community Foundation. And so they don't necessarily have to come along to working bees, but they're there to talk positively about the organisation, encourage others to connect in some way with the organisation. So you don't always have to be on the end of a shovel to be a supporter to a community organisation. Now we're coming to the end of our webinar today that's been talking about some of the key elements of maintaining momentum, and really keen to get any questions that you may have. And whilst we do that, well, we actually do have one question. So we've had one about how do you manage when the key people are no longer able to drive it? They may have left town, they may have passed away, for example. How can you maintain momentum if you no longer have key people driving it? Now we know that often there is a sort of a critical incident, or for some reason you've lost that critical person, and perhaps your organisation hasn't really built that successor base particularly well. You're all going to be doing that post this webinar. But perhaps I'll throw to Kerry first and ask about strategies to help address that, particularly in the short term.
Well, I have a local cricket club that every season announced that there will be no season due to lack of people, and yet it runs every year. So that's their strategy. It is really difficult when someone does suddenly fall out, and it can happen at any time. We know that, and that's why it's important to have good systems in place and records, not just in people's heads. But the reality is, if that organisation is viable, it's strong, it's needed, it will continue. It may not continue exactly the same way and as smoothly, but it will continue. So I know that there's crisis happens often, but take a deep breath, get through it. You'd be actually surprised who will come out of the woodwork and assist in those situations. And it's an opportunity for someone to step up. It's a fantastic opportunity. Yeah, a bit painful at the time, but there's some good aspects about it too.
Great, thank you, Kerry. There's certainly, I think, it comes back to what we talked about very early around purpose and relevance. And if your organisation at that point in time realises that no one is keen to step up, if that does happen, then sometimes I think it is okay to review an organisation and say, do we still need to exist? We have a habit of hanging on to community organisations in our communities despite some of the decline in population numbers and our time available, and sometimes mergers and letting go of things can be a solution to allow people to put their quite limited time and energy into other community organisations that could take on some of the remit of the organisation that may be disappearing. Now I think we might look at recapping, or perhaps we might take another question actually, in terms of tips and tricks for succession planning. Ian, have you got any tips and tricks for succession planning, given how long you were at the helm at BCG?
That's right. I'm not a big role model. I think our group, we've got a board that used to be made up of panel members. Now we have 4 non-executive members based on skills audits. and for instance, we have one board member that voluntarily comes from Brisbane every meeting, and that has helped to maintain the integrity of the board, the skills, and the capacity to do the work, and that helps the farmer members of the board, be able to cope with the workload. And so that, I think in our organisation, one of the big challenges is to maintain staff, the staff to do the work. And we have 20 staff, and they're turning over, not very frequently, but it's about training them as you go along. Be prepared to put the money into them and encourage their progress and give them enough rope to hang themselves almost by encouraging them to take responsibility.
And be forgiving when they make mistakes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, I think there's a certain appetite for risk and an appetite for having some failure, and perhaps I think the best way to deal with that is being pretty transparent around, we're a new set of players running this organisation, and we might get some of it right and some of it wrong.
Have belief in them.
A number of organisations are successfully using technology as a way to maintain momentum and access additional resources and support. Social capital connecting across communities is sometimes challenging in more remote locations, but we have heard of great examples of virtual morning teas where people will sit down in front of the computer and Skype across a network of people, or the telephone conference facilities, and connect up and share approaches and experiences across wide geographic areas. And another thing that many rural and remote communities forget to access is many corporates in Australia provide skilled volunteering programs where they've got staff, often based in metropolitan locations, that are really wanting to support community organisations, and they might not be able to get to your community and connect with you personally and your organisation, but they certainly can be used to help with things like business plans, sustainability plans, strategic plans, marketing and fundraising activities. There's lots of different ways that you can access skilled volunteers through corporate programs. And Kerry, you were just waving at me just as an example.
And there are community leadership programs right across Australia. Contact them. We have what we call a skills bank here in North Central Victoria, and that means any of our graduates can be engaged for a short-term project to assist with it. So think of your community leadership programs across Australia.
Thank you very much, Kerry. We've had a final question from Lynn about how do we help people to delegate, or how do we learn to give others a go and to let go? Have either of you got words of wisdom on how we can support people to delegate and let go of control?
As a control freak, a reformed control freak, I question myself when I get so excited and so passionate about something that I start to think that no one else can do that role. The alarm bells start ringing, and that's my personal little thing. I've learned that it's not fair to the organisation, it's not fair to everyone around me, and and I've learnt now, and I guess that's the wisdom of age as we get a bit older, to take a step sideways and really encourage others to step up. So the moment I start thinking I'm really important, that's when I start thinking, no, you're not. My role is a different one, to encourage others to step up.
Ian, have you got any thoughts on how we can help people to delegate? Often those who are in control and are not wanting to let go are not always open to being told that by others on their committee.
I mean, I know it's difficult, but I think you can do procedures like, for instance, our group have young people's groups, which have their own discussion groups, and we actually get people in for training to be a board member, for instance, and try to mentor young people to take more responsibility in the organisation. I often think young person often running their businesses and flat out with kids, in their 20s and 30s, but they get to a stage where they really want to have time to deliver in more of a community sense. And I think that they're the people that really are able to take up both men and women.
Okay. And it comes back to, if you've got your structure, your terms, well, there's a natural flow on then with new people coming in. So if you get your structure right, review your constitution, get a limited period of time on the board, and that helps move people.
I think sometimes breaking your organisation's activities into mini projects and allowing different people to lead those projects so that you're actually giving people specific tasks and roles that allow them to step up and demonstrate their competence and capabilities to those who may not be so confident about letting go of the reins. So we really are at the end of our hour, and I do appreciate the time that everyone's committed to staying with us today. If I can just recap very briefly how you keep going. I think we've heard persistence, patience and passion are really critical to be able to continue to be rigorous in what we do and having the structures and the processes and systems in place, remain relevant with a clear purpose, and to build relationships within your community, across your community, and with outside influencers and decision makers. Remember to communicate and tell your story, and most importantly, share your mistakes, because the more people know about what you're doing, why, and how you're progressing, the more that they are likely to feel in some way connected to what you're doing, either your purpose or the specific activities that you're doing. Most importantly, I think it's really important to have fun, and if you're not having fun in the roles that you've taken on, it's time to step away, let someone else step in and give it a go, and find something. There's always another role within your community. There's always roles for us to take on, and find one that will allow you to enjoy yourself, have fun, and really celebrate with other people in your community that are connected to the same cause and the same passion. Finally, there's a list here of some helpful resources that we think may assist some of you that are exploring that maintaining momentum challenge, and we know that that's experienced widely across Australia with community organisations that are being asked to do more and more. So feel free to have a look at those resources, and if you'd like to be in touch with us, we're always happy to answer a phone call or an email. This particular webinar and the slides will all be available on our website, so you can come back to this and use the hot links to get through to those resources. And if I can remind you to save the date for the 16th of April for our 4th webinar on leadership development, about developing and growing the capabilities of our community leadership team. So it's carrying on from some of the ideas that we had today about sharing the load and supporting others to step up and take on different activities. So finally, thank you very much for your time. We'd love to have your feedback, so please take a few seconds to complete the survey as you exit the webinar. Or feel free to contact us via email or phone and share your story, share your community organisation's experiences, and tell us how you thought this webinar went. Until next time, this is the FRRR team, Kerry Anderson and Ian McClelland. Thank you for your time. See you later, everyone.